everyone. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. It's called ALICE, Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. In other words, the working poor. More than 1 million Virginians are working, sometimes 2 or 3 jobs, but don't make enough to cover rent, groceries, transportation, and childcare. So what can we do as a community to help working, productive citizens who simply do not earn enough to make ends meet? How do we as a society provide ways for everyone to earn a living wage? The United Way of the Virginia Peninsula is tackling this issue head on, and we'll talk about it next on Another View, right after this news from NPR.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. We have a great conversation coming to you today. We're going to be talking about ALICE. I'll bet you have met ALICE and not even realized it, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. I want to tell you about 2 things that I think you might really be interested in. On January the 29th at 6 p.m. at the College of William and Mary, they are hosting a screening of a film called 16 Bars, and it is focused on incarceration, music, and justice, and was filmed in Richmond jails. They're also going to have a discussion about justice and local actions with local partners. It is free and open to everyone. It's being held at Tucker Hall 127A at the College of William and Mary. So if you are so inclined, go check out the film. And then on January the 30th, at Old Dominion University, the Women's Studies Department presents Linda Villarosa. She's an author, journalist, and renowned expert on race and infant mortality, and she's going to be talking about the American infant mortality crisis. And if you've been following the news, you know that the rate of infant mortality for African-American females, regardless of economic situations, is much higher than anyone else. And so there's some things going on there, and she's going to hold a discussion. It is, again, January the 30th at 6 p.m. at Chandler Recital Hall, co-sponsored by the College of Arts and Letters, ODU Women's Center, and the Institute for Ethics and Public Affairs. It's free. It's open to everyone. There are lots of things happening in Hampton Roads, so go check those things out and become more informed. So the working poor, people who are working full-time, sometimes with multiple jobs, but their income is not enough to cover the basics like food, rent, healthcare, childcare. ALICE households cover the spectrum. They live in urban, suburban, and rural areas, could be college students, the elderly, single parents, young couples. They have a variety of educational levels and are racially diverse. January is Poverty Awareness Month, and we have representatives from the United Way of the Virginia Peninsula here to talk about ALICE and what they and the community agencies are doing together to overcome poverty on the peninsula. Please welcome Charvella West. She is the Director of Community Impact and Operations with the United Way Virginia Peninsula. Hi, Charvella. How are you?
Hi, Barbara. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. And Shante Bell, or Tay, as she likes to be called, is the Executive Director of the Historic Triangle Community Services Center, and she is a self-described ALICE. How are you doing, Tay?
Doing well. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much for joining us. So you're the CEO of a nonprofit, but yet you say that you describe yourself as ALICE. What's your story?
Well, I self-identify as ALICE because ALICE means asset limited, income constrained, and employed individual. And that is exactly what I am. Although I am the executive director, CEO of a nonprofit center that supports 9 other nonprofits, it's still difficult at times to make ends meet. Still kind of paycheck to paycheck, and don't have much available as far as services to help supplement where there's lack.
Charvella, I think people have a mental image of someone that they think is poor.
Right.
So talk about what that image is, and then let's talk some realities in terms of what the working poor really are.
Right. So not to get too far in our history, but, a few decades ago, there
Getting
was
that
the
history.
myth of the welfare queen, right? And so that's still very prevalent for a lot of folks who may live in a certain privileged environment where they're not exposed to need on a regular basis. But what we see across our community and the work we do is that many of the people who are facing need, it may not be on a daily basis. It may just be one incident that happens that puts them right there on the edge where they're forced to make some really tough decisions. We see folks who are very educated, even college educated, many folks who work in trades and have certain skills. It just takes maybe a car accident or a car breaking down. Childcare costs are out of the roof for many households. Just maybe an illness, one little thing, and it creates this ripple effect that makes it difficult to get yourself out of that hole.
Tay, I see you shaking your head. Do you have experienced some of this?
I have, which is kind of why I'm still in this situation. I mean, that one little incident for me happened to be the death of my mom. It was a tragic situation, and at the time, life was good. I had a good house, job, business going. And then when that happened, life changed drastically. And it's taken me several years to kind of rebuild. At the time, I let go of my business, and I lost my house, and things changed. But it's different, one thing for everyone. Like you said, it could be a car accident, it could be illness, it could be, I can't afford to pay daycare anymore, so now I have to leave my job, or my car broke down, so now I can't get to work, so it just kind of depends.
And these aren't people, we're not talking about people who, as the myth goes, that are, kind of sitting on their behinds, if you say, and waiting for a welfare check. We're talking about people who want to work, who are working, who are doing everything that society asks you to do in order to be a productive citizen. Charvella.
Right. And to Tay's point, a lot of times when that one thing happens, where do you find the resources to pull yourself back up? Where are those bootstraps, right? That common language that we hear. But yeah, so many of the folks we see are working sometimes seasonal work. We need them to do that work, especially if you look at certain parts of our community where we have a large senior population. We need healthcare workers to take care of them, or maybe in recreation, amusement, hospitality. We need folks. That's a huge part of many of our local economies. And so we need them to do that kind of work, but oftentimes it's seasonal. When we look at our higher learning institutions, our colleges, we need folks who are there when the students are there. And so we need them in our community, but there are times when they are not working as frequently as or as regularly as they might be accustomed to. And so when you're a wage earner, you don't have control over that. And then you can do your best to save. But like Tay said, it just takes one thing. And then if you don't have a support system that you can draw from, then oftentimes you find yourself in this gap where you have too much to get government assistance and apply
such as
for
food
those
stamps or public housing
SNAP
and that kind of
benefits,
thing.
absolutely, even childcare, and that's a huge burden for many families. But you don't make enough to cover, that gap and continue with your daily expenses.
So what would you two ladies say to someone who would say, well, then just get a better job, make more money? What's the problem?
That's easier said than done. That's definitely easier said than done. I mean, of course, there's jobs available out there, but I mean, it's not that easy. Like I said, I'm the executive director of a nonprofit, and many people think that everything is gravy, but it's not. I actually have a part-time job on the side to make ends meet because, like Charvella was saying, I don't qualify for many of the services because I make too much money, but I'm still paycheck to paycheck.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Are you, Alice? Are you asset limited, income constrained, and employed? And what is your struggle? Give us a call and let's talk about it. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So, Charvella, why did the United Way get involved? The United Way of the Peninsula, and I know the United Way of Southampton Roads was also involved in several across the nation in terms of this look at Alice and this look at poverty.
So in 2017, United Way did a community needs assessment. It had been quite some time since one had been done on the peninsula, and when we did focus groups, surveys, all different kinds of attempts to hear from folks, what does our community need to be its best self? And what was a common thread, whether we were talking about education or crime or housing, poverty was the most pervasive issue that covered so many different aspects of our community. And so from that, the Alice information kind of fed into what we already knew about our community. As you mentioned, it is something that's available across our country. A number of states participate in understanding Alice, acknowledging Alice, and working to serve Alice. And so that fed into our Pathways Out of Poverty collective impact agenda. And part of that, too, is United Way getting back to its role in the community as a backbone agency, supporting the work of all the nonprofits in our community, our partner agencies, but also connecting those resources with our government partners as well as our corporate partners and tying all three of those sectors together to really make a lasting impact in our community for folks.
So in part of your research, and this blew me away, I have to tell you, until I really thought about it for a moment, but in Hampton Roads, 3 localities with the highest percentage of households in below or at the Alice threshold were Williamsburg, Newport News, and Hampton. Now, Newport News and Hampton, I kind of get, but I was blown away by Williamsburg.
Right. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the hospitality industry.
That's what I thought about that.
So and I think a lot of people kind of misunderstand the geography there too. The Williamsburg area actually encompasses James City County as well as York County. The city of Williamsburg, which is what that data speaks to, is a very small area. It encompasses the College of William and Mary, so you've got to include the students there, as well as the people who live there and serve the college students. You've got a lot of hotels, motels, the hospitality industry there. And it is a very, very small sector of what we call the greater Williamsburg area. So that is usually very surprising for folks.
Yeah, because people usually think of Williamsburg in a very I would say more affluent, upscale area as opposed to, and I think they would be surprised to know that there are people living there and struggling.
That speaks to the proximity, right, of Alice to everyone, and poverty being our problem, not their problem or his or her problem, but it really does impact every single one of us in our community.
So, Tay, talk about what are some of your coping mechanisms? What have you had to do, or what do you know of others who are in and who are Alice in terms of how you get through from month to month?
Well, I listen to a lot of the stories through our organization. We have a community services referral and resource network. So I have the opportunity to hear some of the stories and some of the things that people have to do to make it. Of course, they depend on some of the agencies that are in our building. Fish, who provides food, household goods, clothing, as well as some of the senior services that Peninsula Agency on Aging provides. We also have Head Start in our program. So a lot of those in the community rely on these agencies to help them make it. We don't typically try to turn people away. A lot of organizations, they base it off their income, but I feel like if you have a need, you wouldn't be there unless you had a need. So things that I've heard that people have done is, food pantries, babysitters instead of putting their children in daycare, They rely on grandparents or cousins, aunties, and things like that to be able to watch their children, which we know how that sometimes can turn out for the children because they're not prepared for kindergarten when it's time. So it's kind of like a trickle-down effect. But there's various things that people have to do. They rely on family members if they have them. That's why we need to have the discussion a little bit more about other resources that we can provide as a community, because there are very little resources available for those who are the quote-unquote working poor.
Now, you have you've been accepted into a fellowship, if I'm
Yes.
correct, with William and Mary.
Yes.
To actually explore and study this issue. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Tell me about that and what you guys are doing.
That starts this spring, actually, and we are going to be having conversations with the students and the faculty there and others in the community. It's a way to engage everyone with more than nonprofits and have more discussions around the solutions. We'd like to bring in local government and really see what we can do to make an impact and provide additional resources for ALICE individuals. A lot of the local nonprofits here, they will provide I don't like to say, but hand out. We want to provide more hand ups and long-term support, because that's what's needed.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I mean, Charvella, that temporary, my electric bill is, my light's about to be turned off. I can go grab a grant from a local community organization, but that's not going to help me next month.
That doesn't solve the problem.
Right.
It temporarily, helps you out for that month. But like you said, what are you going to do next month?
That, and kind of like Tay was saying, that's not something you can depend on. You can't put that in your budget, right?
Right.
And so what we found with quite a few of our nonprofit agencies that do have that financial assistance, they couple it with some type of financial management, education piece, which is helpful. But it's only as helpful as the money you have in your bank account, right? It's kind of hard to budget beyond what you have. And so we are working, and that's where the other sectors come in, right? Because people have to earn more, and kind of back to the question you asked earlier about why don't people just get a better job, right? So even in the situation Tay talked about, she works 2 jobs. She has children. So where do you fit in the education and the training you need to get a better job? Without sacrificing
and you're going to school
something.
too.
Yes.
Yeah. See.
Yeah. So where do
exactly.
you fit that in? And we also have to think about access. Where are these opportunities? Who can get to them, and what does it cost them to get there? Sometimes, especially for our Middle Peninsula neighbors, the folks on the upper side of the peninsula, when Thomas Nelson and other community college opportunities are in Hampton and Newport News, we don't have a bus system that is efficient enough to get folks from where they are to where they need to be. And that impacts them getting to other jobs as well, even if it's not a matter of I need this additional training. Maybe I already have the training, but in my community, only these jobs are available to me. This pay is available to me. How do I get there where they're paying more? And then so what you find is folks, especially this time of year, they might go get a used car that they're probably going to pay too much for. That's not going to last them. And so they get that job 2 or 3 localities away, cities away, and then they're making good money, and then they can get their own place and they can pay their bills for a few months, and that car breaks down. And now
It starts
what?
all over
And then
again.
the cycle starts again.
That's right.
And so then what happens if your job, you haven't been there long enough for pay time off, or they can't work with your, need, and then you have to get another job. Who's going to watch your children while you have to go get another job? And how are you going to pay for childcare to do all that? So it's a cycle.
It's really interesting because I really hadn't thought about this until I ran into someone that I know who works in a education setting. And when it snows, they close the school and they don't get paid because they're hourly workers. You don't think if you're a salaried person who, has a job that can help, you're blessed enough to have the money to cover all of your bills and to be able to save and so forth. You don't think about that level of how critical it is that if you miss those 40 hours that week or those 36 hours or whatever your situation is, that has a true impact
Absolutely.
on what happens to you.
Absolutely, especially considering we see a lot of landscapers. I mean, and we need them. We pride ourselves in this community across the peninsula about our lands, how beautiful they are, and people have to keep that up. But many of them are hourly workers, and bad weather impacts their ability to provide for their families, and then what happens after that? And then they have to make some really hard choices. My check is not what I'm used to. So do I buy groceries or do I pay my electric bill? Do I go buy medicine or do I pay my car insurance? All of these things come up for families, and it's, and you hear that phrase, robbing Peter to pay Paul or something like that, and it's real, and Peter and Paul are not people. They are the electric company. They are your landlord, and it's a cycle. And if you're without intervention, you just keep going.
How do you get people who don't experience this on a regular basis to understand what we're talking about? What can we say to them to make, and I want to hear from both of you on that, to make them truly understand this is not about laziness. This is not about not being ambitious. It is not about not wanting to work. It's not about any of that. This is, I'm working and I'm doing, working in an environment that I'm trained for or whatever, the situation is, and it's just not enough.
I think having them have the experience would be more impactful than telling them or showing them or meeting some of the people and having a sit-down conversation with them and really understanding what they're going through. But I think the most impactful way would be having them have the experience, having them have to live off of $500 a month in food stamps and make their paycheck work, to pay their rent and their electric bill and get their kids to dance and put gas in their car. They work 45 minutes away, and what that looks like. Oh, your brakes are bad. Oh, now you need an oil change. The baby's sick. You have to take off work. Have people go through these experiences on the salary or the wage that Alice individuals have to do.
Bringing awareness is a huge part of what we do at United Way to help bring the community around this issue. And for us, it's really, we've kind of taken a simple approach and just reminding people to be kind. That's seeing people, right, for who they are. So when you're at a restaurant and your server is there, see that person, and
actually give them a decent tip.
Yeah.
But I mean, really, because
treat them with respect
that's what
and kindness.
They depend on.
And then I think when we see each other, we are more likely to engage each other and have those conversations. And even when that's not a possibility, remembering to be kind. It's really simple. United Way has done a lot of work, especially in the schools, around remembering kindness.
I was doing my research. I recognized that November 4th through 8th was Alice Awareness Week back in 2019. That you all on the peninsula, you put out a challenge, which I think is just fascinating. So, and there were only 4 things that you challenged people to do: to live a week in Alice's shoes, and then you said pick one. So shop for a week's worth of groceries on a SNAP budget. SNAP meaning that is, other people know them as food stamps. Shop at a secondhand store for a work-appropriate outfit for less than $15. Take public transportation or carpool to work. Do your laundry at a laundromat. I mean, these are all things that your neighbors, your employees, your church members are going through that you may not even realize. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Ashley joins us from Smithfield. Hi, Ashley. You're on the air.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much for talking about this. A lot of people don't really think about those that are on the edge of income. So when you think about this, I want people to get even a further context of this. Even though I am working, I might not even what do you call it, qualify for SNAP. I might not even get those food stamps. So that even puts me further at the edge. But I think another thing is getting the right workers in the situation. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of information and there's a lot of young workers coming into the field. But, for example, even if I qualify for that $5 in food stamps, I qualify for HEAP. So a lot of people will actually turn down that $5 in food stamps and not realize they're turning down the HEAP, which is your heating and cooling assistance. What was another thing I see a commonality in? Like helping people, like I just helped a senior citizen with getting a free divorce. Now, granted, the young families, I can't help with that, but that allowed this woman to be able to claim her Social Security with her first husband versus second. So that knowledge is definitely needed. Or like when I'm helping you pay for a bill, is it better? Maybe is a washer a thing that I could actually buy for you for $100 versus you having to spend $40 at the laundromat weekly? That is a huge spending item. So a lot of these things, like the right worker be able to look at the system or the whole situation and get at the root of that problem. They help out with that resume. The resume is a huge thing. I've helped people before that had the skills that didn't know how to write the skills down, get a resume and get that better job. And I do agree that child care in this area and the rent is just ridiculous. Just with the military pushing it up.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up the military. Ashley, thanks so much for your call. We appreciate that because there are military members also who are Alice.
Yes.
Isn't that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Wow. I looked up at the time. There we go. If you're just joining us, we're talking about how the community can assist households described as Alice, asset limited, income constrained, employed, or the working poor, with Charvella West, Director of Community Impact and Operations with the United Way of the Virginia Peninsula, and Shante Bell, who is the Executive Director of the Historic Triangle Community Services Center and a self-described Alice. Let me give some numbers out here for people to just think about. So now this is on the peninsula, since we're talking with the Peninsula United Way, but $1,136 is the fair market rent for a 2-bedroom apartment on the peninsula. Okay, so that's $1,100 there. $61,668 is the average yearly household survival budget. That means what? What does household survival budget mean?
So that's how we develop the Alice data. The United Way in New Jersey, actually, they look at the cost of living in your particular area. They look at housing, childcare, transportation, food costs, the whole gamut, utilities and everything. What does it cost for this household to make it from month to month? They add it up and you get your household survival budget. And
this is for a family of 4?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So on the peninsula, you would need to make $61,068 a year in order to be able to cover the cost of living on a day-to-day basis.
If you have 2 children
in your household.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay. $1,306 is the average monthly cost of childcare for 2 children. That I almost lost my breath. I was like, I'm so glad my daughter was born in the 80s. Wow, it's changed a lot. That's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money. And so a lot of families, again, have to make that tough choice. Do I go to work and pay, more than half of my income to childcare? Is it worth it? Or do I stay home? And I think that's kind of what the previous caller was referring to. We call it the benefits cliff, right? So that gap between I make just enough not to qualify, but I don't make enough to cover it.
And if someone is trying to figure that out, they talk about the that you shouldn't spend more than 30% of your income, for example, on rent or mortgage.
Right.
But if you aren't making enough money and you've got this kind of rent that we just talked about, $1,100 a month, that's difficult.
It's impossible
for a lot of people.
It is.
You said it's impossible.
It's impossible.
It's impossible. There we go. Daniel joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Daniel. You're on the air.
Hey, thank you very much for taking my call. Yeah, the reason I wanted to join in was to make a few observations here that I haven't heard any emphasis on individual responsibilities for families to dig themselves out of poverty or whatever situation they are in. And for me, that is what I think is the crux of the matter. I say that to me, I have gone through this experience before. I came to this country in 1993. When I left Africa, I only had $100 in my pocket. Now, 27 years later, I own 2 homes, and one is paid for. And this is how we did it, me and my wife. She is an ODU PhD graduate. But for the first 17 years, she didn't work because we had to take care of the children, and the bills were too much. So what we decided to do was to live within our means, not over our means, which means we didn't have cable TV. In fact, I just bought my first television in 2014, and I even had to cancel the subscription to the cable because the kids were abusing it. So I don't have TV and cable now. Cell phone. I didn't have cell phone until 2011 because it was going to give me money from the business I was doing. And that's the only reason why I went into it, to get the cell phone. Now, people in problems today, I think, overspend, get what they don't need, and keep up with the Joneses. And if you were to ask me, my experience tells me if you live within your means, you can make it, because it's not how much you make.
Okay, Daniel, thank you. I'm going to let the panel respond to you, and I appreciate your perspective. We have a lot of people who feel that way. Also, Charvella?
Well, I think he brought up some great points, and it kind of ties it back into what you were talking about, that fair market rent. That might be beyond your means. Just to pay your rent might be beyond your means. And so over the years, especially from the 90s to today, housing costs have increased dramatically while wages have not. Mm-hmm. And so it's not a matter of choosing something that I don't need over something that I do need. The choice is, I need both of these things. I need a house and I need childcare, and I don't have enough to cover both. Mm-hmm. And so I can appreciate the individual responsibility and the successes that many people experience when they work really hard and they have support, and they continue to work hard. I can appreciate that, but it's not always accessible for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Tay, absolutely. I mean, are you running around with, doing movies every Friday night and an excessive cell phone and I mean, I'm joking a little bit, but I'm not. I mean, in terms of, we're talking about, you can't even get to those things, right? Because you're much more worried about the very basics.
Exactly. Me and many other individuals, Alice individuals, as the gentleman said, he talked about many of the sacrifices he made as far as no cable and, cell phones and different like that. Mm-hmm. Many people make these same sacrifices, but it's still very difficult to dig out of that hole without additional support. Like you said, if your rent is $1,100, and depending on where you live, it could be more than that. Mm-hmm. That's low in some areas, but it does take you to be responsible. It does take for you to take responsibility for your situation and make certain choices, so that you can move yourself forward. But it's not as easy as cut off the cable and get a lower cell phone bill.
And you refer to them as sacrifices, and for many of the folks we see who are Alice, that is normal. That is not a sacrifice. They aren't paying for cable. They are using Wi-Fi for their phones so they can make phone calls because that's free. Mm-hmm. They're going to the library where they have access to Wi-Fi. They're using online services.
And some of these things, like your cell phone, for example, really is not so much a luxury anymore. Right. I mean, everything that is being done on your smartphone.
Especially if you're looking for work. Right. You always need access to that.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Cynthia joins us from Carrollton. Hi, Cynthia. You're on the air.
Hi. Hello.
Hi. You're on the air.
Hi. I just wanted to kind of give a little history and of myself.
Okay.
I grew up in Section 8 housing. 11 years of my childhood was spent there. I moved out when I turned 16. My mom remarried and we moved out. I am a military veteran. I served prior to 9/11, during 9/11, and our return to Iraq. And I got out when I had my daughter. I was married. I now have 2 kids. I had to go back on to federal funding for food stamps, things like that, when I got divorced, when the marriage didn't work out. And then I have now, when my youngest started preschool many years ago, he's now 13, I went to college, got my bachelor's in environmental biology, and then couldn't get a job right away, so I went in and got my master's. They were wanting more experience. I was hoping that would get me in. I just finished my master's last May in environmental science, and I still am not getting a job. I'm still either getting told I'm overqualified or I am underqualified still. So the experiences that I have dealt with are exactly like some of the things the ladies have been discussing. There's not a lot of options sometimes when you feel cornered like that. And it gets very frustrating and very easy to want to quit. I haven't quit yet. I'm still applying daily to jobs.
Well, hang in there, Cynthia.
Quitting.
And we wish you the best. We hope that does work out for you. But Tay, I see you shaking your head. You want to respond to what she said?
First, I'd like to congratulate her on still pursuing her education and not quitting, because that's really what it takes. And she used the exact word that I was thinking. It's frustrating. It's really frustrating, and it's hard to not want to quit. But I commend you, Cynthia, for just keep on going, and I encourage you to continue, because that break for you is coming. And as she was explaining, that one thing that we were talking about earlier, for her, it sounds like it was her divorce.
Right.
Right. So now she's a one-income household. And how do you adjust to that?
Yeah, those are the changes that people go through. So I want to talk a little bit about, before we take a couple other calls, and the phones are lit up, so just hang in there if you're trying to call through. What are the agencies and what are the government agencies, your partners, talking about in terms of how you are going to make a difference? You guys set some pretty specific goals for yourselves.
Yes, we have. Our goal actually is to move 10% of our population above the ALICE threshold by 2023.
Wow. So that's 3 years from now.
That's pretty audacious. Yes, absolutely. But the good news is there are so many people who have joined us in this mission. This is actually the community's goal, right? United Way may have had started that conversation, but we have so many folks on board with us. United Way has 41 different partner agencies that cover anything from healthcare with our clinics to employment with Goodwill, for example, education with early childhood, and even ongoing education for adults. Our partner agencies, are across the board, very diverse, working with folks who are experiencing poverty, helping them get out of it, and keeping folks out of it. We also work with our local departments of social services on a number of things. Tay kind of hit on it a little bit. A lot of agencies, our local community service boards and departments of social services are working a lot around trauma and understanding how trauma impacts someone's ability to thrive, to build resilience, and understanding that poverty oftentimes can create trauma. And then our corporate partners are a huge part of our mission to invest and resource our community.
So will raising the minimum wage make a difference? Does that?
Yes, absolutely. Raising income it helps to balance that budget sheet.
Everything else has gone up.
Someone made a comment a little bit earlier, and I was thinking about this. We were talking about how you can get assistance, and then they also comes with some financial literacy training and so forth. Is financial literacy an issue in terms of ALICE, of people who are in the ALICE situation?
I believe so.
Okay.
I think it plays a part as well as some other things. But I think that if more individuals had the education and the information earlier on in life, it would help avoid some of these situations that people find themselves in. The basics, budgeting, savings, credit, how to maintain your credit, how to build your credit, that type of stuff. I think if it was taught earlier on, maybe in high school, in more of the communities, it would help these, young adults become more responsible adults and parents, and it would kind of resolve some of these issues. It's definitely a major part of it.
Okay. I think you kind of touch on the generational aspect of this too. So yes, education in terms of managing your finances is a really important part of helping someone lift themselves up out of poverty. But it's only as helpful as the income you have. It's only as helpful as the expenses you're able to eliminate. It's only as helpful as the opportunities that are available to you. You can budget all day long, but if you are still in the negative every week or every month, you're not moving anywhere. So it's a couple. It's and both.
It's
right?
and both. Okay, let's go to Jay. Jay joins us. Jay, where are you calling us from?
I'm calling you off the interstate right now.
Oh, okay. Be careful.
Oh, yeah. I got Bluetooth going. Let me put another Mickey in the pot. I'm a seasonal worker, drive a truck. My family is overseas. I made exactly $42,000 last year, 2019. I do not qualify for health care coverage. And I am sick as a dog right now. I take a certain infusion that I have missed 2 infusions because of a disease I have. And I went through the drug company. I did everything the drug company told me to do. Give me my 1099, my W-2 forms for the past 5 years. This, that. They're telling me, we can't help you. You make too much money.
Got you.
I am right now today sick as a dog, and I have to work to provide for my family who is overseas that cannot get here at this time.
Oh, Jay, I'm so sorry. I hope that things can work out, and perhaps there's an agency or something that they can mention that may be able to help you. Where do you live? Are you living on the south side or the peninsula?
I live on the peninsula. I went to the city of Hampton.
Okay.
I make too much money. I own too much property. It's always the same thing over and over again. I'm between a rock and a hard place.
Okay. Let me let Charvella answer your call, Jay. Thank you so much for calling in, and please be careful on the highway.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear you're not feeling well, Jay. Yeah. There's definitely a nasty bug going around. But what we've seen in response to the expansion of Medicaid in our state is that there are thousands of people who have newly qualified for this new insurance, and that is so wonderful. And there's still, like Jay, many folks who are above that income requirement. And so our clinics actually have really stepped up to acknowledge this need and fill the gap to cover folks at higher income levels than what they had previously done. And so maybe Jay could look at one of his local clinics to see he may qualify for some assistance there. Okay.
Tay, did you want to respond?
I agree exactly what Charvella is saying. That is the option. And
go ahead. Keep talking.
And I'm sorry.
We're just trying to figure out which call we're going to take.
Okay. But yes, that's one of the options that we do have available right now. And as far as, helping with people with healthcare costs, some local churches now will help people with medication and things like that because there's not too much available for that. So he can maybe check with some local churches in the area as well.
Let's hope that works out for him. Yes. Let's try to get one more call in. Chuck joins us from Moyock. Hi, Chuck. You're on the air.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I'll be quick. My question, I got 2 questions. The first question, the government said if I work so many years, I could draw my Social Security. So I worked 45 plus years. Now I'm drawing my Social Security. But I can only make $17,600 a year. And if I go over that $17,000, they penalize me. Why? I thought once you get up to getting your Social Security, you did all they asked you to do, you could now save a little money. You know, you get your Social Security, you can still work a little and save a little money. But no, they don't want it like that. They want to penalize you once you go over that $17,000, and I don't understand why they do that.
Okay, Chuck, let's get an answer for you because we're just about out of time. Come on.
Well,
Charvella, do you know?
Right. Well, I don't have the answer to this question, but I will say, so the ALICE population specifically refers to those who are working, but we see so many seniors and disabled folks who are on a fixed income, but as we talked about before, the costs are rising, but the income is not.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's the biggest thing. So we got about 3 minutes left. Give us some advice. First, Tay, with you. For someone who is Alice, who may feel like giving up, as you had talked about before, give them some encouragement.
I would encourage, like I said to the lady that called in earlier, just keep going. I would also encourage you to assess your own situation and see where you can make adjustments, whether it be in your habits, your daily habits. What can you do to bring in an income? Can you start a side business? Can you get a little side job? But the main thing is just don't give up. Don't lose hope. We are talking as a community about resources and other ways that we can further support ALICE individuals. So there are solutions coming. Mm-hmm. And keep your ear to the ground. And hopefully in the very near future, we're looking to work with United Way on a few things for the next few years to help them meet that goal of bringing 10% of the population in our area above the ALICE threshold. So just don't give up.
And also put aside that pride a little bit, maybe?
Yes.
And reach out?
Yes. Put aside your pride. I know it's not easy to do because you don't want to feel like, well, I can speak for myself. I didn't want to feel like I was begging. But when you need help, ask for it. Okay. There are a lot of organizations that are able to help.
It definitely takes a community, right? And so I'm going to put in a quick plug. The census is coming up. Please, everyone participate in the census. This is how our government knows what our population looks like and what our needs are. There's a lot of work happening in the different localities around the census. Some are doing some really creative events and awareness projects. Please pay attention to that and participate in the census. And sometimes people don't know how to reach out or where to reach out. Go to our website, www.uwvp.org, United Way of the Virginia Peninsula, and you can find our resource and referral agencies that'll get you started on connecting to local community resources. Okay.
Charvella West and Shante Bell, thank you so very much for joining us. We appreciate it, and we will be right back.
Hi, this is Essie Patha-Murkerson from Law and Order. You are listening to Another View.
Wow, it's been so long since we've had a transition. You pulled out my favorite. Thank you. I appreciate that. Welcome back, everyone. She stood her ground by sitting down 11 years before Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott. Now folks in Gloucester County, Virginia, where Irene Morgan spent her last days, are making sure she isn't forgotten. Our Lisa Godley has more on the woman behind the first case to challenge Jim Crow.
It was July of 1944 when 27-year-old Irene Morgan decided to challenge the system that was keeping the races separate, known as Jim Crow laws. Morgan, who was recovering from a miscarriage at her mother's home in Gloucester County, decided she was well enough to return to her job and her home in Baltimore. She hadn't been on the Greyhound bus long when a white couple boarded and the driver asked Morgan and the woman sitting next to her to give up their seats. Irene Morgan describes those history-making minutes in detail in a 1995 documentary titled You Don't Have to Ride Jim Crow.
The white passengers got on, and the bus driver told me that I would have to move. There were no seats at all there, and I refused to move. And that's when he got off the bus, got the sheriff, and the sheriff came in and said, "I'm going to arrest you." And I said, "That's perfectly all right." Then he asked the girl in the seat next to me to move. The girl had her baby in her arms, about 5 or 6 months old. and she was going to Ardmore, Pennsylvania. And she started to get up to move. And I snatched her back because I'm wondering, where are you going? I said, where are you going with that baby in your arms, you know? And then he handed me this piece of paper, supposed to be a warrant. So I just took it and tore it up and just threw it out of the window. So then when he put his hands on me, you know, to arrest me, well, I was furious with him at the time, and that's when I kicked him. I started to bite him, but he looked dirty, so I couldn't bite him. But anyway, he was bowed over. He was really in pain. So he couldn't do anything, so that he got off the bus. He was turning all colors. He got off the bus. So then his deputy sheriff came.
This time, Morgan was arrested. She was found guilty of resisting arrest and violating Virginia's Jim Crow law. The NAACP filed appeals on her behalf, but the Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals ruled against her. The U.S. Supreme Court would hear the case next. The result was a landmark decision ruling that Jim Crow laws did not apply to interstate travel, but Virginia and the other southern states ignored the ruling. Decades would pass before it was enforced. Listen carefully and you'll hear Irene Morgan's name in the lyrics of this song about Jim Crow. While Irene Morgan's case inspired activists, including the Freedom Riders, to use interstate buses for their nonviolent demonstrations, her fight against segregation didn't earn Morgan the credit she deserved. But two groups in Gloucester County want to change that. Carolyn Lemon, who works with the Black History Committee and the Friends of the Gloucester Library, says it all takes place the first Saturday in February.
There's a marker commemorating what she has done for the county and for the country. And so this marker is placed on Route 17 and Hook Road. And on Saturday, February the 1st at 10 a.m., they're going to unveil this marker. And we've invited dignitaries from the county and the state. And we're trying to involve as many people as we can to know more about Irene Morgan, because she's not as well known as Rosa Parks.
While Morgan lived most of her life in Baltimore and then Long Island, she returned to Gloucester County to live out her final years in 2000. Morgan was awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal a year later. The citation read, "When Irene Morgan boarded a bus for Baltimore in the summer of 1944, she took the first step on a journey that would change America forever." Irene Morgan passed away in 2007. For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
And as a reminder, the Black History Committee, joined by Friends of Gloucester Library, will erect the marker to remember Irene Morgan and her historic Supreme Court case on Saturday, February the 1st at the intersection of Route 17 and Hook Road. And it all starts at 10 a.m. Another Black History note from Another View. Before we sign off on today's broadcast, I have a favor to ask. Our eView newsletter email list went a bit wonky, so I need everyone to please go to anotherviewradio.org and sign up for the newsletter again. If you are a previous subscriber, we need you to resubscribe, please. And we hope to get many new subscribers too. We send it once a week to let you know our next show topic. Please sign up at anotherviewradio.org. Next week on Another View, author Jeffrey Blount, his book is The Emancipation of Evan Walls, and it's a look at how we in the Black community treat each other. Interesting conversation. You don't want to miss that. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Todd Washburn is our audio engineer. And Paul Bibbo, producer of Hearsay with Kathy Lewis, answered our phones. Thank you, Paul. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Make it a fantastic weekend, everyone, and we'll see you next Thursday at noon for Another View.